In the studio now, we say hello, good morning and welcome to Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence. And the reason we're talking to her is we wanted to know that you should be aware of the signs of heat stroke and maybe invisible aspects, Frankie, of the sun. OK, you can look, you know when you've got sunburn, but then you may be feeling a bit off and it could be heat stroke. How would you know?
Heat exhaustion and heat stroke are
two different things,
but on the same kind of spectrum. And it's essentially your body's physiological response to being overheated and not being as efficient at cooling itself down. So we have sensors in our body, in our skin peripherally, and also in our brain, which sense a rise in core body temperature and switch on mechanisms to cool down, like flushing our skin and the blood vessels dilating or increasing sweating. When you get on the elements of heat exhaustion and heat stroke, it's when those mechanisms are overwhelmed and you're not able to cool your body down. So things to look out for are feeling quite unwell after a period of being in the heat, feeling a bit drowsy. You may notice that you feel a bit faint and dizzy as your blood pressure can drop, feeling nauseous, reduced appetite, and you can sometimes also get stomach cramps and things. When it gets a bit more extreme, usually you can cool yourself down and feel better within about half an hour. If those symptoms are prolonged over half an hour of trying to cool yourself down, it may actually be heat stroke, which is an emergency. And that's where a whole heap of physiological things go on in your body. And it actually can cause central nervous system dysfunction. So you can become confused, lose consciousness. There is complete kind of shock and organ dysfunction. And it can actually lead to death. There's around 2,000 deaths a year in the UK due to heat stroke.
Gosh, that's really shocking.
2,000 deaths a year?
Yeah.
And they've been talking about the excess deaths being caused by this little heat wave that we're experiencing, and we're expecting a spike in those at the moment. So it's really important people heed these warnings. Is anyone in particular vulnerable to that, or is it just about exposure? I mean, my parents are absolutely religious about wearing hats in the sun, to the point where they're sort of neurotic about it, but they make me feel paranoid that if I'm in the sun without a hat on, I'm going to get some sort of heat stroke.
So there are particular groups that are more vulnerable. Children, especially ones who can't tell you when they're too hot, elderly people, and people with certain kind of cardiovascular or circulatory diseases like diabetes, heart disease, they are at increased risk. But actually this can affect anyone. So these are entirely preventable conditions. So none of us are kind of immune to this. And I would really advise people to be sensible when...
I think the dangerous thing is you could look at those symptoms. The effects are awful, but you could look at the symptoms and it could be a number of things that would be wrong with someone.